evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Sports Exchange. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, and I have a very different combination, but a very good one. And we'll lead it off with Rick Curti. How you doing tonight, Rick?
I'm doing well, Scott. Thanks for having me on your program.
You're very welcome. And I have Mike Santos back. And by the way, Mike, before you go into Rick Curti, I have to tell you, my friend Andy Caston sends his best. I had the chance to see him on a Zoom call today, and he enjoyed our last hockey broadcast, so that was pretty good.
Very well. His Golden Knights are still available.
Yeah, and the team that I predicted to win it all, which we're going to get into a little bit later in the broadcast, so I feel pretty good about that pick for sure. There'll be a lot of Vegas Golden Knights stuff. So, I know that Wendy's gives a senior drink for a lot of us that can get away with it, but I don't think Wendy's going to really worry about giving Roy Jones one. So let's talk about a boxing match, exhibition, whatever you want to call that, where Roy Jones, who's 51 years of age, by the way, is threatening to walk away from his exhibition bout with Mike Tyson, by the way, who's 54, due to scheduling issues because it upset his calendars. Now, the bout's set for September the 12th, but Tyson wants to move it to November 28th. The biggest issue is the fact that Jones is not a full-time boxer anymore. So he does other things to make an income. Boy, let's everybody say that we feel bad for Roy Jones doing other things to make an income. Let's say, I feel bad. Okay, so with that said, Jones retired in 2018. There will be no fans in Carson, California, but it's an 8-round bout, okay, at $49 for pay-per-view. Tyson said the reason why the change of the date was to move more people to save the biggest comeback in boxing history. Is this a good sales job or is this a snow job?
It's a snow job. I mean, come on, they're 57 years old, and I thought their big concern was COVID-19. I thought that's why they were pushing it back, and for him to say no is because he wants to do other things is absolutely ridiculous. And Mike Tyson, he was a great fighter, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, one of the greatest champions, but he's in his 50s. Roy Jones, to me, was the best pound-for-pound fighter I ever saw in my lifetime. This would have been a sensational match like 20, 25 years ago, but they're in their 50s now. But the heavyweight division is such a joke now. I'm actually intrigued to see it, but I'm not, $40 or $50 intrigued to see it. So, we'll see what happens. If they should have this in Las Vegas and they can call it the Geezers and Caesars. Or maybe after the boxing match they can give like free prostate exams. So I mean, it's just kind of one of those. Would have been a great match, back in the heyday. But right now they're both come on, they're in their 50s. So to me, it's more like an exhibition, kind of like intriguing match. But Tyson's got to sell it any way he wants to. So I mean, I'll give him a marginal thumbs up for that.
Hey, Mike, what do you think of the Geezers at Caesars? That actually sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Well, I like that name, but I'll tell you what, I've seen this fight before. There was a 2013 movie with Robert De Niro and Sylvester Stallone called Grudge Match.
Really?
And that's what it was. It was two old guys that was settling a grudge they had between them. This is ridiculous. I love boxing. I love MMA. I love all sports, but at a certain time, we all must retire and move on to other things. And the fact that Roy Jones Jr. says it doesn't fit into his schedule because of the other things he's doing. If he doesn't have time or availability to make the kind of money that they'll make off of this spectacle, then that's just really too bad.
Well, I got to tell you,
I hope he's got other things that'll make him a few $1 million.
Yeah, I got to tell you, though, I was actually intrigued by the Conor McGregor-Floyd Mayweather fight when I was out in Hawaii at my niece's wedding, and I didn't mind watching it because it was entertaining. I'm not so sure I'd be intrigued about this whole thing. To me, I don't think Mike Tyson's looking at this thing as an 8-round exhibition. I think he's looking to kill Roy Jones Jr., so it's not for the sense of the word kill, but you know what I mean? He's not treating it like an exhibition. He's really looking at it like he can really stick it to him in an attempt to try to get another shot at the heavyweight title in his 50s. That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, Scott. From Tyson's point of view, I mean, he's looking at this as George Foreman too, right? I mean, a guy that maybe gets a win over an old, beat up, non-boxing Roy Jones Jr. and then he can continue making steps towards the title. I think you're probably right, but this doesn't have the background story or even the interest that the McGregor Mayweather fight had, and the McGregor Mayweather fight really happened for another reason, and that was the fact that McGregor was getting big, maybe a little too big for his britches, but he was at the point where he wanted more money from the UFC, and the UFC known to be real stingy with paying its fighters. So McGregor was in the process of putting together a union, and Dana White didn't want any part of a union messing up the business model they have right now. So he agreed to put up with that Mayweather-McGregor fight and enter in McGregor, depending on who you talk to, $65 to $80 million, and satisfied him and satisfied him enough that he wouldn't go forward with creating a union, which is really too bad because now you see a lot of those MMA fighters, particularly in the UFC, that just don't get paid, and more importantly, they don't have the health care or the other benefits they need when they do get to the ages of Mike Tyson and Floyd, Roy Jones Jr. and it's going to be a real problem as mixed martial arts advances and some of these fighters are now entering their 50s and 60s and soon to be 70s and don't have the care that they need medically because of the years they spent fighting in the Octagon.
Yeah, the McGregor fight with Mayweather is called Looking the Other Way via Dana White. So with that said, let's go up north of the border and let's talk about how the NHL bubble is holding up. Mike, I tell you what, I said all along that I thought that was one of the best bubbles out there, and the NHL has not disappointed us one bit, has it, Mike?
No, they've done a good job. We talked about a couple of weeks ago, and going into it, I had talked to some GMs for a couple of teams, and they all said the league had really done their homework, and they felt pretty confident that this was going to work. They've done a good job. No positive tests. I think we're at the point now where we're going to start to see who really wants to be there and who doesn't. We talked about that before. I mean, now you've got guys that have been there for a few weeks, and what happens when you get down a couple of games in a playoff series? You just pack it in and go home, like some teams seem to have done in this round. You have guys like Tuukka Rask from Boston who decided it's not all that important to them because they want to win the Stanley Cup. Sure, they do, but they want to make a lot of money, and these guys really don't get paid a lot of money comparatively for winning the cup. That type of money is just not there for them.
Rick, what are your thoughts about the NHL bubble?
I think they've done a sensational job. I think of all the sports, they've done the best job, and it's great to have a lot of your teams in Canada and have a lot of players who are Canadian or from other countries. That's a big help because here in the United States, we've done a horrendous job of trying to contain COVID-19. So very much kudos to the NHL, and I think they're having an exciting season. I think they're doing very well. And we'll see what happens. And I kind of I like the Bruins. Bruins and Capitals to me are two of the best teams out there. And we'll see what happens. But I see them having a Stanley Cup Finals. And I like Boston, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I've thought it all along. I think though the Capitals have their hands full, though, Mike, with the New York Islanders. I think you have the Barry Trotz intrigue of wanting to knock off his old team. And they looked convincingly when they ended up beating the Panthers, right, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that was any surprise. We talked about that a few weeks ago, right. that I thought that was the difference between those two teams, that Barry Trotz, nothing against Joel Quenneville and his winning some Stanley Cups with guys named Kane and Taves and Hoza, but I think overall, for this situation, Trotz is the better coach, so... but I'll stick with the two teams that I gave you. when you asked me, Scott, and that's Tampa in the East and Colorado in the West. I think they're the two best teams when it comes down to it.
Well, Tampa looked awfully good against the Columbus Blue Jackets, a team that had their number a year ago. They ended up winning it in 5, but you had some overtime games involved there. So it was a very
they really won it in 8.
Yeah, right. No, that's true. I mean, those games were really long, that's for sure. So, yeah, the Lightning are moving on to the next round. So, you know, Mike, you make such a darn good segue to about where I'm going. So, with that said, we'll go with the team that I actually predicted to win it all. We're going to talk about the Vegas Golden Knights goalie Robin Lehner, who was traded by the Chicago at the deadline, gets revenge in the playoffs. He was 8-1 since the trade deadline in February. He was 16-10-5 with Chicago for the 2019-20 season. Now, he revealed that he had a bipolar disorder and overcame substance abuse. Now, Chicago received goalie Malcolm Subban and defensive prospect Stanislav Jamin in a second-round pick. So, Mike, my question to you is this. Would Chicago have made this trade if it was in playoff contention?
I don't think so. And I say that because since they stopped playing the regular season, the Hawks made some front office moves, a number of front office moves, actually. I think they moved as many as 10 people out. Not Stan Bowman, the GM, but that signals to me that, you know, when things stopped, of course they didn't know when or if they'd get started again this year, but it seems like they made a conscious decision that they're going to turn the page and start rebuilding for the future. So, yeah, I don't know, but I think that they felt before COVID-19 that they weren't going to make the playoffs. Of course, we discussed this as well a few weeks ago.
Right.
You know, the reason why the NHL expanded this field was because of the Blackhawks, the Rangers, and of course the Montreal Canadiens. When those three teams complain, they get noticed, and that's what happened here. So instead of having a 16-team tournament, they created that play-in round to get those three teams some games and hopefully get themselves some ratings.
What did you think of that play-in round, Mike?
I wasn't a fan of it.
No.
I wasn't a fan of it, but I'm not surprised by it. I mean, you see teams, for instance, like the Florida Panthers, and I understand why they're doing it, but they're trying to sell it as, you know, they made the playoffs this year, when
right.
The reality is they didn't, and if they did, they didn't really stick around very long. So,
that's true.
You know, like a lot of things these days, right, it's about marketing and revenue. And that was the reason for it. But also, you know, they've got to find a way to create revenue with the TV networks during this little short period of playoff hockey, because if they don't, they've got some serious problems when it comes to revenue sharing and the collective bargaining agreement. And that's really the primary reason why they're playing it all.
Okay, so
that if they don't find ways to get this TV revenue, especially, they'll fall short of their numbers, and the players would lose their escrow, which is about 10% of their overall salary.
All right, so I'll ask both of you guys this question, but I'll give it to you first, Mike, and then Rick, you can follow. All right. How is Robin Lehner feeling about defeating his old team, Mike?
Yeah, he was, fairly emotional about it from what I see. But good goalie. I think like a lot of goaltenders, they develop a little later, and it's tough to give up on a goalie, because the best years of the goaltender seem, unlike other players, especially in this day and age, the best years of the goaltenders are when they get up into their 30s, and certainly their late 20s at least. There's very few goalies that are stars when they're 18, 19, even 21, 22, 23. So I'm not surprised, but we'll see if he keeps it going next year.
So, Rick, if you were Robin Lehner, how would you feel about beating your old team?
Oh, I feel great. Sometimes change is good, and sometimes a team might say maybe his days are past him, or we don't see him in our team developing. And then all of a sudden you go somewhere and you beat them. I mean, it's nothing but a better feel. I remember when Marcus Allen got traded to the Chiefs. Al Davis said he's all washed up, and Marcus Allen probably had one most productive years with the Chiefs, and I know he loved playing the Raiders because he wanted to stick it to them. Or I remember when Roger Clemens got traded and went to the Blue Jays, where the Red Sox thought he was washed up. And I remember when he went back to Fenway and had he struck out like 15 batters. And I remember when he looked up at Dan Duquette up there to say, see, you screwed up. You shouldn't have traded me. So I think it's a great feeling when you can go back and beat your old teammates and kind of show them that, see, you made a mistake and you shouldn't have never gotten rid of me.
So, Mike, now you have an interesting two-headed monster out in Vegas. Okay, you got Marc-Andre Fleury, the first guy ever taken by the Vegas Golden Knights, and a Stanley Cup winner. And now you have Robin Leonard, who's had a pretty good start to his Vegas career. You have a two-headed monster. Where do you see this goaltending situation playing out for the Vegas Golden Knights, Mike?
If it was anyone else but Fleury, I could see a problem like you have with a lot of teams. However, this happened to Fleury in Pittsburgh, and he was a good soldier, and they ended up winning a couple of cups in a row, actually, back then, 2016 and 17, if you recall.
Right.
So I think this is a very similar situation. Maybe the age of the goaltender is a little different. But Fleury, Fleury, from what I know, is about as classy of a guy as you can get. And he's won championships. I don't think he's a big ego guy. I do know that he's very happy living in Vegas, and he's really been a great part of that community in the last 2 years. So I don't think it'll be a problem, only because of a guy like Fleury. And if Leonard can't keep it going, I mean, let's face it, this is a short period of time that we're judging him on it right now. If you can't keep it going, it's pretty good insurance to have Fleury there.
Well, the only thing I'll say about Marc-Andre Fleury is his number 29 jersey will be retired in Las Vegas. I really believe that.
Yeah.
He reminds me of Leroy Selman. Although Selman was drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers out of college, Fleury being the first reputable name, so to speak, to go to Vegas, and Leroy Selman had his number retired by the Buccaneers. Well, Marc-Andre Fleury will have his retired out in Vegas. So let's continue to stay on.
You hit me in the heart there, Scott, because now that there's no more Leroy Selman's barbecue restaurants,
really,
I miss the best brisket I ever had.
Really?
Yeah, he had a number of restaurants here in the Tampa Bay area. Of course, wow. He passed away years ago, but and boy, did they have fantastic barbecue there.
Well, amazingly enough, Leroy Selman started the program at the University of South Florida, my alma mater, which, by the way, even though I'm not on camera right now, I proudly wear my USF long-sleeve shirt. So, Leroy Selman, God rest in peace. I wish I would have had your barbecue, but I live on the wrong side of the state. So, with that said, okay, I don't want to get hungry because all I had was just a meal replacement shake, so I'm going to shake over to another subject called the Montreal Canadiens. What a segue, guys. I'm telling you. For a guy that's had no sleep, a very good segue. That the Montreal Canadiens eliminated the Pittsburgh Penguins 3-1. The surprise, obviously, was that, do I call that a surprise? Pittsburgh ended up shipping Phil Kessel to Arizona, and the Coyotes made the playoffs. So Pittsburgh drops back to back opening series for the first time since 2011 and 2012. But here's the thing. Okay, now head coach Claude Julien left the bubble after game one to Philadelphia because he had chest pains the night before. Claude Julien. So here's the thing. Okay, Philadelphia now leads that series 3-1. Game 5 is tonight at 8 o'clock. Here's the storyline, Mike. What are your thoughts about Pittsburgh's early departure first?
I think Pittsburgh was one of those teams that wasn't prepared to get started, unfortunately. And there were a few of them. The Panthers were another one. I'm not surprised that Montreal beat them, at least not all that much, for one reason. I think the players on the Canadiens had some pride. I don't think it had anything to do with Julien. I don't think the team's done anything since Julien's been their coach now. But and he didn't do much with Boston at the end of his stint there.
Right.
But I think the players there have some pride in that locker room. and I think they were getting a little tired. And to the dismay of the Canadiens management, they decided to stick it up some people's behinds and screw up their chance for the first overall pick. And our friend Mr. Lafreniere, the Frenchman, is going to go number 1 overall in the draft this year.
So I guess my question to you, and you lead me really well here, did Montreal falling behind 3-1 right now? Are they missing Claude Julien as their bench boss?
Now? I think you're just seeing what kind of team they really have, and they're going up against one of the hottest teams in the league. Not only during the bubble, but because they went and they got the first seed during that play-in, but also the way they played a month before the season ended.
So what's your take on all this, Rick?
Well, anything can happen during a shortened season. And it's nice. It was a nice story to hear about the Canadiens. They were a powerhouse for many, many years, and you don't really hear much about them anymore. And I agree. I think Pittsburgh was just not equipped, just like a lot of teams are. I think they probably thought there wasn't going to be a season. With COVID-19, they probably thought it was going to be canceled. And then when they came, they were like, we're going to have a season. And some players might not have taken it seriously, or maybe some were out of shape. And it showed. Montreal really played very well against them. And you got to tip your hat off to them. So, congrats to Montreal on that. But right now they're facing a better team right now, and they're kind of showing who they really are right now. But, it's really good for the NHL to always see some upset, and a lot of people see it as a big upset, but to me, I don't, because I just don't think Pittsburgh was ready to have a season this year.
So, Mike, my question to you.
I think Rick's right on the money. I really do.
Yeah. So, did Pittsburgh really miss Phil Kessel? I know he was a pretty good player for him, and obviously he made the Coyotes better. So, the loss of Kessel out in Pittsburgh, and then the addition of them in Arizona, which is more bound anyways. They don't do anything, but the Coyotes showed a little bit of life. What about the Phil Kessel effect?
Yeah, I think at least in the shortened series that they did, because let's face it, I mean, Phil's not a guy that's in shape in January of the regular season. So I don't think, coming in and playing in the bubble would have bothered him all that much. But what I think they miss is a guy that's a pure goal scorer. I mean, he's definitely from a different planet. He's got his own ideas of what he should do and what he shouldn't do. But not too many people put the puck in the net as often as he does. And in this playoff season this year, they probably could have used his goals in that series. He's
got to be loving it in Arizona, though. I mean, obviously the Coyotes are a more bound franchise. They can't figure out what part of the valley they want to be on. They want to be in the East Valley, and they're in the West Valley, and they're trying to get back to the East Valley. And if you want to play the geography game, who knows if the Coyotes will ever figure it out, being a guy that used to live in the Valley of the Sun. Okay, but
yeah.
But
I think that's a dangerous place for Phil Kessel to be. And I'm sure he'd be content to just finish out his career there. I mean, he's made a lot of money. He's won Stanley Cups, and
right.
he's not much known for anything but lounging around in season or out of season. So there's probably a lot of good restaurants and places to play golf out there, and I don't think hockey will be a priority for him there as it was in a lot of other places.
Yeah, not a bad way to finish out your career. You could go to Scottsdale Links, and they have that TPC Players, the waste management thing. And I have some good friends out there. I actually spent some time out in Arizona during the year, and I lived there for a while. So it's a great place to go. But you know what, Mike? I'm like you. I do enjoy the ocean too, not bad stuff. So let's from one part of the desert to another. So going forward, Mike, how does Vegas look going forward? I'm sticking with my pick. I think I picked Vegas against Boston, didn't I? I believe.
Well, you did, and you had your sleeper, which I won't mention because they're sleeping.
I don't want to hear it. Although I'm going to hear it from you anyways in Edmonton. Yeah, they went to bed early.
No doubt they're going to be tough. I mean, Pete DeBoer will do a good job with them here.
Right.
But they got a lot of firepower, and if the goaltender stays out, they're going to be a tough team. So they're definitely one of the teams the interesting series is between the team that I said was my sleeper, which is Vancouver and St. Louis. I mean, that's a real interesting series, tied now, and we'll see. Probably goes 7. The way it's gone. I mean, they've already had a few overtime games. The defending champs and the Canucks. So I think that's an interesting one. But overall, for me, Vegas and Colorado are clearly the best teams in the West. And I just like the way Colorado's put together a team out there. I really think they're strong and they're deep.
Well, bear in mind, I picked Boston with the intent that Tuukka Rask was going to be there. I didn't think the guy was going to bail out on me. Seriously. I mean, really. Tuukka Rask didn't do me any favors. But yet, who knows if they'll get there? I don't know. I don't feel as good about the pick because of Tuukka Rask, but therefore your pick with Tampa looks better because Tuukka Rask is there. Now, once upon a time, though, and I remember being at the All-Star game in Tampa when I thought the probability of a Tampa Bay versus Vegas final looked like the way to go, but it didn't work out that way. But there's a possibility that scenario could indeed take place.
Yeah. Yeah, no, again, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Scott. This whole bubble situation, and Rick alluded to it earlier, it's completely new to these guys. And a big part of this whole playoff season is going to be how do guys react to basically being stuck in a hotel room by themselves for, maybe as many as 9 or 10 weeks. And obviously Tuukka Rask didn't take to it very well. And so, there may be others coming down the pike here.
But meanwhile,
this is a real interesting playoff season for that reason.
But meanwhile, Toronto and Edmonton were first out. I know where you were going with it, and I have to eat crow every now and then, but I expect Edmonton and Toronto to be certainly in the tournament longer, yet they were one of the first ones out. Why did that happen that both of them got knocked out early in their respective home areas? Well,
even though they're in their home area, they're still locked in that bubble like everybody else.
Okay.
And in some respects, it may be even more difficult for them because they know their wife, their kid, their girlfriend or girlfriends are only, a couple of miles away.
Right.
Instead of hundreds of thousands of miles away. Yet they can't leave this little restricted area. And playing in those arenas, especially with no crowd, no fans, there's no home ice advantage for them as well. But more importantly, they weren't particularly strong teams, either one of them during the year. They were,
right.
They were headed for, possibly qualifying for the playoffs, but neither one of them had a terrific year.
Okay. All right, and we'll wrap it up on one other note, the sport that you're all too familiar with, and that's UFC. So let's talk about the fight with Daniel Cormier, and it looks like his opponent was Steve Miocic. I hope I'm not mispronouncing it too bad. So why don't you go ahead and review that fight in general, Mike?
Stipe Miocic, the heavyweight champ.
Well, good. I knew I'd find a way to butcher that name, but don't hold that one against me.
First of all, Stipe Miocic is an interesting character. He was actually a baseball player and a wrestler at Cleveland State, and he's a firefighter in Cleveland. And got involved in mixed martial arts and worked his way up to becoming the heavyweight champion of the world. He's defended his title more than any other heavyweight. The only person that beat him was Daniel Cormier, who was a champion at both the light heavyweight and heavyweight levels. The light heavyweight level because of the actions multiple times of John Jones, who can't seem to keep himself clean outside the Octagon. Otherwise, I don't think Cormier, who lost to Jones both times he fought him, I don't think that there's any chance Cormier would have won the light heavyweight championship. But anyway, this is something to me. I always go back to Ali Frazier, and it's the trilogy. Dickie Ward and Arturo Gatti. Those are my two big trilogies in boxing. And there's something about a third fight between guys, right?
Right.
And especially if the first two fights were split, and that's what you had here. You had Cormier who announced that this was going to be his last fight, and that he was going out regardless. And he had beaten Miocic in the first fight by knockout early, and Miocic beat Cormier by knockout in the second fight. So, of course, this fight went the full 5 rounds, and was really a good fight if you're a technical MMA fan, because both good fighters obviously understood, how they won and how they lost in the previous 2 fights, and so they were prepared, and it was really a chess match, so to speak. And but more than anything else, I think they both showed that they have unbelievable chins. And when you're in the heavyweight division, whether it's boxing or MMA, and guys throw punches as hard as they throw them, you better have a good chin if you're going to be a champ. And that's what this was. I mean, both of these guys ended up with heavy shots and were able to take them. Cormier was in a little trouble at the end of round 2. But it wasn't until so late in the round that the bell was going to save them. Both fighters ended up with the victims of eye pokes, something you don't see in boxing, but of course in MMA you have those gloves that fingers are open. So they both poked each other in the eye. We had a little Three Stooges action there, for some entertainment, and. Cormier, some folks alluded to the fact that Cormier couldn't see out of his eye after, but if you watch the fight before he was poked in the eye, that eye was closing anyway. So I know Cormier didn't make an excuse that was the difference. Great fight. I think Miocic is getting to the point pretty soon where he should probably hang it up, but now our good friend John Jones has said that he's vacating his title in the light heavyweight division, and he wants to go up to the heavyweight division, and of course, fight Miocic. So we'll see what happens.
Well, I know Cormier has lost 2 straight. He's age 41. Everybody talks about these guys absorbing a lot of blows. You wonder about the health insurance and all that. So, but yet Dana White doesn't think that Cormier will fight again. There's more of an emotional kind of thing, but then again, who knows? The only one that really knows is Cormier. So keeping it in the Rick Curti terms, we have to make sure we do that, right, Rick? Okay.
Yeah.
One of my favorite trilogies was Ali and Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier.
Yep.
Any debate there, Rick?
Yeah, that's a classic.
Yeah.
I don't know if you both knew, but when sports were first shut down because of the pandemic, the ESPN on a Saturday night showed all 3 fights back to back. First time that had ever been done. We're going back to March, and I watched all 3. It was fantastic, and it was really a classic. I mean, I was very young when the third fight occurred, so I don't really remember. And of course, back in those days, you couldn't watch them except for maybe the third one was on closed circuit, I believe.
Right.
But I do remember if you watched Wide World of Sports, that the 2 combatants a few weeks later would sit in a studio with Howard Cosell, and they'd review the fight round by round, and Howard would try to keep them from fighting each other again.
As a matter of fact, I'm old enough to remember those days. Wide World of Sports, without a doubt. And Three Stooges, well, what can I tell you? I actually, as much as I hate ties, I actually own a few Three Stooges ties, by the way. So, for whatever it's worth. and I'll tell you what.
That's the greatest trilogy of all in sports, in my opinion. It was Muhammad Ali and Frazier. It was just, you had such drama, especially the first fight. It was Ali's first fight. Yeah. Since getting his title stripped for, not going to war and everything. And people were angry with him and people wanted to see how, and they're like, oh, Joe Frazier's really not the real champion. It was handed to him. And he came in there and he broke Muhammad Ali's jaw. And he got his first loss. So, he really redeemed himself. And of course, you can't forget the Thrilla in Manila. Oh, yeah. So to me, that's the greatest trilogy in all of professional sports is Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier.
And, Mike, I also remember, you're right, during the pandemic, I was watching a lot of those fights. I'm a big boxing junkie. I've got pictures of myself with Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, James Toney, just to name a few people. Actually, Chuck Wepner, I've got him with. My jaw's been battle tested by a lot of these guys and love every last aching photograph that you can get, your Polaroid moments, and then some with my incredibly metal jaw. No, I'm just kidding with you. Who knows really what it is. All I know is a very active one that doesn't need a lube job. But nevertheless, I remember watching a lot of those fights. At that time, ESPN was definitely desperate looking for programming. And although my favorite one when they were running it was the George Foreman Muhammad Ali one. Who the heck wouldn't really love that fight with the clinic that Ali put on with George Foreman? That's
Mike, question for you two.
Sure.
Was the Ali Frazier trilogy the first time that we had in any weight class a boxing trilogy that fighters fought 3 times?
I don't think so. I'll bet they probably happen in a lighter division, but I don't know for sure. But
I think didn't Jake LaMotta and Sugar Ray Robinson fight like 3 times? He might have. But I think the Ali Frazier one was definitely like the most legendary one. But I don't think it was the first one.
You're trying to get me, Santos. Okay, now you got to spit it out.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm asking a question.
Oh, okay. I thought you knew the answer. You're trying to trip me up.
I was just wondering if it was the first time, and it's certainly, as Rick said, the most well known or the most famous.
Right.
For me, honestly, though, the best trilogy is surely for fighting was Nicky Ward and Arturo Gatti.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that was a war.
I mean, those 3 fights. The number of punches thrown and landed are just incredible. And I mean, we're literally talking rounds where hundreds of punches were thrown. I mean, it was the craziest thing I'd ever seen.
God, he was an amazing fighter.
Yeah.
I remember that time where he had like almost both eyes shut. They were going to call it off and he knocked the guy out. And it was like, oh my God, that was sensational. So
yeah,
he was for the dramatic Gotti for one thing. He was very, like at the last minute, he'd pull something out of his hat and, he'd always been in like in a very dramatic fashion.
Yeah, well, those guys became very close friends during those fights. Mickey told me a story one time that, as only he could. He said that, I don't remember which fight it was, but he said during the fight, Arturo Gatti knocked him out on his feet, and he was out cold, and then he knocked me in. So, just to give you an idea of what those fights were like, but those were as good as I've ever seen, and I gotta be honest, once in a while I'll go on YouTube and just pull them up, and I'll watch a couple of rounds just for the heck of it because they're so good.
Yeah, well, it's amazing how you talk about trilogies. That's why, Mike, I'm glad that you ended up bringing up the Daniel Cormier. No, I'm not going to pronounce the other guy's name as long as I get the name spelled right. I don't really care. I'm past that point. But I'm a big junkie when it comes to trilogies. So, I'm a broadcaster by trade, but don't get me to pronounce some of these absurd names, or I shouldn't say off-the-wall names, absurd. It doesn't matter. But no, I love trilogies, and to me, at least you have a history with some of these things. It's not like you've seen a team play each other 3 times, during the course of a year, during team sports. But when you talk about individual sports, especially boxing, trilogies become a lot more magnified. So, Without a doubt. So, I tell you, this broadcast has been an awful lot of fun as we've been able to talk about combative sports or physical sports on all levels. We talk about boxing, we'll call it the Wendy's senior drink fight, although I don't know. I don't know, unless you want to call it the Geezers and Caesars if it was in Vegas, and we probably titled this broadcast that. But all the way to UFC and with a little bit of hockey in between. So very good.
Awesome.
Very good stuff. So with that said, okay, Mike, why don't you let people know how they get a hold of you? Rick and I will do it, and then we'll wrap up the broadcast. And then No Limits follows the Sports Exchange. So go ahead, Mike, let people know how they get a hold of you.
So the best way to reach me is at msantos@hockeyoperations.org. And I'll always respond.
All right, Rick, you know the drill.
Well, you can contact me on my website at www.charlottebats.com. I'm also on Facebook at Charlotte MLB. I'm also on Charlotte Bats Baseball on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram at Charlotte Bats. I'm also on Twitter at Charlotte Bats Baseball. And you can also contact me on LinkedIn under Rick Curti. And our email address is cltbatsbaseball@gmail.com.
And of course, Rick Curti is a part of the South Florida Tribune. He is involved with the social media department. With that said, Sports Exchange, you can listen to this broadcast through Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. So in case of you folks that thought I was talking too fast, I've heard it before. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. You can reach me here at the Tribune on Twitter at Tribune South, Facebook, South Florida Tribune, Instagram, South Florida Tribune, YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. Mike Santos, by the way, you and I are going to be doing a YouTube video when I come back up there, so be prepared for it, all right, when we get together.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we are.
About what?
I don't know. We'll figure it out. TBD. We got to leave it out there, right? We'll figure it out. I mean, come on. Not going to let it all out. Our website, by the way, www.southfloridatribune.com. You'll be able to find all of our written material through our media distribution partners and columnists, as well as these broadcasts on the southfloridatribune.com. So give it a look. You can also email me at southfloridatribune@gmail.com. And if you want to reach me through LinkedIn, feel free to do so. Scott Morganroth, Morganroth. And you can connect with me there. I'll be more than happy to go ahead and connect with you. So on me. Any closing thoughts, Mike and Rick? Good to have you both on tonight. It's really been enjoyable to see you guys interact. I always like to have different pairs on here. And you know what? This has been a very enjoyable evening seeing you two meet tonight.
Yeah, no, it's fun. A lot of fun. I appreciate both of you and having me on, and great topics to deal with tonight, too.
Well, we're going to bring you back. We'll be bringing you back again, Mike, real soon. We're right deep into the NHL playoffs, so we're going to be working Michael Santos pretty extensively during hockey season. It just happened to work out where we had a weird boxing thing with UFC, but the next one will be all hockey. And maybe when Rick Curti becomes more, he's getting better with the hockey, so Rick will have a little bit of work to do as well, right?
I remember the Gretzky trade. I just saw the documentary about the Wayne Gretzky trade, and I lived in Los Angeles when that happened, and that was like, I told people that was like, it would be like Michael Jordan getting traded to the Lakers. I mean, it was ginormous. Wow. And if it wasn't for Wayne Gretzky, we wouldn't have like we wouldn't have like a team in Vegas or Arizona or San Jose. I think he really brought hockey to the West Coast.
You're right.
Good point. Well, with that said, okay, all we ask everybody to do out there is please wear your mask, social distance, use comments out there, and kudos to our frontline heroes and doctors because they do the dirty work. And I'll tell you what, take COVID-19 seriously. We don't have a vaccine, and this is a virus that can unquestionably kill you. I hate to say that, but there's perception, reality. The numbers do not lie. So on behalf of Michael Santos and Rick Curti, my name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, wishing you a good evening, and No Limits is coming up next. So good night, everybody.
Good night, guys.
Good night.